Hello and welcome to our webinar today on auditing ERP security. Today's session is focused on the Oracle ERP Cloud system, and what we're really trying to look at is understanding your risk, understanding how your security is set up, understanding what is likely to bite you, what your problems are, and most particularly how to satisfy auditors looking in from the outside. I think we know that many people are moving their systems, their ERP systems to cloud-based environment, and there are very good reasons to do that, which I'm not going to dwell on today. But there is an issue here that we're encountering every day of the week, and that is that some customers just aren't understanding the issues with regard to their security. They think that in some way that it's all going to be handled and it's all going to be okay. And particularly if the security is set up in a different way to the environment that you came from, whether it's EBS or whatever, you need to understand what the differences are, what the implications are, and therefore how the risks are going to affect you going forward. In summary, you can't actually abdicate responsibility for security on your system. If someone has access that you weren't expecting and embezzles money from your business, if you're the man responsible, the ERP director, whatever, you are at risk, your job's at risk, and therefore you really need to understand whether you've got problems or not. What we're going to talk about in the next 20 minutes is really how to understand those risks. The point always that I say to CIOs is, look, you've got too many projects on, but what you've got to try and assess is what the priorities are. In this aspect, in this area, what you need to do is assess your risk, understand what the problems are, what the likely holes in your security are, and what would happen if somebody found a way into one of those holes. So our objectives today are pretty simple. It's partially about segregation of duties, but it's about more than that. It's about the whole of your security model on your ERP cloud system, to be understand where your risks lie. And from that point, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to plan your remediation, i.e. how you're going to fix it, or secondly, if it's looking okay, what you need to do is to then look at how you can just satisfy your auditors and perhaps use this kind of service as a means to get out reports against your risk model, against your mitigations, etc. So that's what we're going to attempt to show you over the next 20 minutes. I don't think anybody really needs to stare at my ugly mug for too long, so I'll go past it. The only thing I'll note is that this change to cloud-based ERP systems is just part of an ongoing evolution, shall we call it that I've seen over the last 40 years. Yes, there are changes, there are implications, but some things don't actually change at all, and that's the fact that your security of your ERP is actually fundamental. And secondly, that people come to it last. They worry about implementing the system quite rightly. They worry about functionality of the business. Yeah, they worry about uptime. And then they start worrying about security. Perhaps it should be a higher priority, but the main issue is to understand it. And that's what Preston is going to show us a little bit later on. So I'll let him talk for himself in a moment. Let me start by giving you a little bit of background for 5 minutes. I'm sorry if this bores some of you, but I think it's worth trying to put it into context. Right? Why should you worry about this? Well, PwC do a survey, I think it's about 7,500 companies every 2 years, and they ask them the question, how many of you actually experienced fraud in the last 2 years? The answer is that around about half. This is not a self-selecting sample. It's a random list of customers of theirs. The key point that people say at this point is, well, I don't hear about it. Well, of course, the answer is you don't hear about it because it gets hushed up most of the time. But what you've got to think about is, are you going to be one of those 1 in 2? All right. That to me is a big risk. All right. But the other side of the equation is that people think about hackers in some foreign land wearing hooded sweaters, etc., and speaking some foreign language. But it's actually not like that. Around about half of all of these issues are committed by insiders, by which I mean employees, contractors, etc., etc. So you got to look at the doors within, the enemy within, and actually that's an easier place to start. But the problem is it's influenced enormously and getting worse because of what I call the efficiency conundrum. You've got a risk problem here, but you've just made your life more difficult by moving to the cloud because you haven't got the skills. All right? And most of my clients that I talk to are relying on a third party, perhaps Oracle, perhaps an Oracle partner to provide them the skills. And that's a good thing. That can help. But you've still got to understand your risks. And as you move into a cloud environment, your risks are getting higher, not lower. But riding over above all of it, and I think in the last 2 years we've seen this becoming an even larger problem, is that there is pressure on costs, and therefore we are not necessarily recruiting the skills or paying for the skills. We're taking more risk, all right? And we need to be aware of it when we try and evaluate it. And before we get into the evaluation itself, one other thing I wanted to raise with you, those of you who are coming from an audit background, I know most IT people tend to quiver when I mention internal controls. It's not something that IT people like. What I try and promote all the while is that internal controls are there to help you manage these risks. Yeah, auditors, internal audit in particular, are there to help you resolve these issues. Here is an interesting figure from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Yes, it does exist. That lack or weakness in internal controls are responsible for nearly half of frauds. So if you put the right controls in place, in summary, all right, you can get over a lot of these issues, these problems. All right. And the key thing, going back to the last slide of cost, is to put them in once. I put in sustainable controls, controls that will work for you this year, next year, 10 years' time. So you're not panicking when audit is coming in. So how do we actually do this? How do we actually enable you to understand your risks on your Oracle ERP Cloud system? We have a system we call the QCloud. It's software as a service. It's a web-based portal. And the way it works is we install a thin Java agent, the Q agent, on a device that can see the ERP system, and we use that as a 1 or 2 stage process to suck the data out of the ERP system. All right? That then sends the data up to the cloud-based environment, and then when it's run the analysis, it will give you a link back to the results. All right. So I think rather than me wittering on any longer, I think what I'm going to do is at this point is hand you over to my man Preston, who's the man who understands these things. Let Preston show you exactly how this works, what it looks like, and what the data is that it will give you.
Thanks, Mike. So let's start with the idea that in any ERP system, the access that you give to your users is what's paramount onto deciding what kind of security you've got in place. And so what we do with our system is we give you a quick little engine that takes an extract of roles and security from your system in ERP Cloud and runs it up into our cloud instance, which allows you to then run the metrics and comparisons over that data set. So once you've done that, we present the data to you on our cloud in a format where you can review sort of the overall summary of the data as well as the details, which provide you that opportunity that Mike was just speaking about to do the remediation and make changes to your roles and fix security. So as you log in, when you have your user ID and password from us, we'll allow you to log in here and see sort of a KPI up at the front that kind of gives you the idea that there are certain obstacles to having a tight system, and that you can identify the kind of the top 5, 6 right off the bat. It does that for both roles, for users, and also talks about the rules that come up most commonly as violations within your system. Those three things are, like I said, are the summary level. And then down deeper, as we get into kind of the details, what we see here are some general security metrics that allow you to converse with your group and your security groups about how some things have been architected. So getting an idea of the number of active users within your system, these are all driven via hyperlinks so that you can actually get those users within your system to review them. The number of inactive users, which can be a gap. If the inactive users have roles still assigned to them, they can quickly be activated and gain access back to a system that you think they don't have access to. The number of roles that you have assigned per users, high number of roles per user typically indicates confusing or conflicting security that needs to be reviewed. And then looking at roles that have inter-role conflicts, or roles whereby just inside of the own role itself, there might be conflict of process and design in the system. And so if you look at that, we'll give you that very clearly here. Again, at the summary level, and then looking at the percentage of users out of your entire subset of users, how many of them have violations or problems with your segregation of duty checks, and then the number of users that have violations in total. All of that is a metrics compared to the security that you have set up in your system, and the segregation of duties that we've defined as part of our process of delivering a service to you. We predefine a large set of SODs for you to check and use right out of the gate, and in that, the detail here gives you that violation review piece, either by the policy itself, meaning the violation that you're trying to check against process that someone has, or by the user if you'd like to look at someone in specifics. So by policy, we're able to actually drill into a process and a policy ID and look at the label to get a good idea that it's, in this example, it's the goods receipts process as well as the ability to approve invoices. If that violates a segregation of duty within your system, then you'll see those two users that have that in the system. And if you drill down further, you'll see the privileges inside of Fusion and Cloud that you've been given, and you can see very clearly the two sections that create that conflict. On the top, the process goods receipts, and then the bottom, the approve invoices. So it's very clear where you need to make your changes in the system. Another level of detail that's very important in Fusion is the idea that you can look at the actual roles themselves and then the hierarchy and how they're organized within the system. All of this goes into the construction of security inside of the cloud instances, and so this is good knowledge on how to go directly to the problem and mitigate and make those changes to clean up your security system. Likewise, we provide the data backwards for you so that now you can look at the actual user itself and then look at all the violations by user so that you can make those changes here. As you make the changes, then the next time you run that system, those will clear off the system and you'll have less and less of a violation set to work with. That's the goal, right? The goal is to do the remediation, make the changes, improve your security, run it a second time, and make sure that your changes have taken effect and that you've actually cleaned things up. Sometimes people in our departments and our companies have access to certain processes in the system that need to be there, whether it's because we're taking over for someone who's on leave or some sort of holiday or some sort of change in staffing requirements. And when that happens, we provide you an opportunity to mitigate those issues like this, which actually then lets you document for your auditors what the actual mitigations are going to be. So it's very clearly listed what's going on here, and you can actually save that mitigation, define the reason, new employee changes, for example, set an expiration date for it as we're maybe making changes to our department and divisions, and hit that save button. And what that does is that allows you to account for the fact that, one, you've recognized that there's an issue, and two, that you've actually managed it, you've notified it, you've taken some sort of action against it. And if, for example, that expiration, if you run this exact same iteration again and run another SOD check, you'll actually eliminate those people from being in violation because you've documented and made yourself aware of it. And then on the second side, if that date is passed, that expiration date is passed, which you don't have to set an expiration date, but if you do, and you run it after that expiration date, that person will then pop back up on the violation system as well. And so then in the future, those mitigations are tracked again, same way, by policy or by user, so that you can actually review those as you run each of your iterations. You can review them, make sure that they still apply and that the rules still apply and that your mitigations are still in play. As a general rule, this is how we give you the data to review on the side of things, as well as we give you an Excel spreadsheet of all of the grids that you've seen before here, as well as a PDF report that gives you the summary overview and documents the types of validation reports that you've been doing so that your auditors have a document to review. And lastly, we have a process for you to actually store data on this particular audit so it stays with it. Any kind of paperwork that's been signed and scanned, authorizations, SOP changes, you can actually keep those documents here on this particular audit to go with this audit, so that as you give access to an auditor to review, they may have access to all of the information that you had and make a review and hopefully declare that you've addressed all of the things that are out there.
Thank you, Preston. That was very enlightening. I hope our audience found that interesting as well. A couple of things I wanted to clear up then to finish this off. First of all, security. We are a security business. We've been auditing security on ERP systems for over 20 years. And I'm not sure that there's many companies in the world that could say that. Our movement into ERP Cloud is just the latest ERP that we've picked this up for. So the first point is that the data we're looking at here is not business data. We take no personal data. The only item that might be viewed as personal data is the username. Some people believe that is personal data, some don't. All right? It probably depends on what kind of naming strategy you've got. All right? But there is no other business data taken. And secondly, that everything is secured at rest using triple DES encryption. All right? And also on transmission up and down to the cloud. So to finalise, well, what are you going to worry about? If I was, and strange enough, I have been in the position of looking after an ERP system, what I want to know above all else is what are my risks? What are my problems? I want to analyse where I need to put my time and my money. I need to understand where the major frauds are on my ERP, but most particularly, what I need to do is to understand what my risks are on my system. Has it been set up properly? Is it worth running an audit? Takes a day, takes probably an hour's effort to extract the data. Is that worth being able to sleep at night and not worry? And then, and 25% of the audits we run across all of our users, we've run using this service over 250. I think as of must be past that. I think that number was from a few months ago. But around about 25% of them show that the customer has few problems, a bit of tinkering here, but most of the audits show significant issues. And the point is, you need to understand those issues to be able to know whether you need to put effort in to remediate it. How do I get to best practice? But the second issue is you need to start looking at around how you're satisfying internal and external auditors. So we have clients now who are using this service on a monthly basis to run a report, show internal audit that there are no issues outstanding, nothing has changed since last month, and then they'll be clear, everything will be fine when external audit comes in once a year. All right. And the key point of this service is that it's immediate. We contract with our clients on an annual contract, generally speaking, for a monthly fee. But if you want to run an audit, depending on how many you've committed to and paid for, you can just go to the service and call it off now. All right. It might take an hour to run. With a larger user, it might take a couple of hours, but you'll get the answers back very, very rapidly. All right. You have no technical knowledge required to run the system. The first time you set it up, it needs some technical access to be able to access the data. But once that is set up and operating, there is no technical knowledge required. So an internal auditor could run this system. All right. We provide pre-built content, i.e. SOD rules, but we do advise clients, certainly after the first audit, to look at tailoring those audits to the business. All right, involve your business areas, business units in understanding their own security and building up SOD rules to suit that. So we provide consultancy around those issues to help you with that. So I think that's about all we have for you today. Have we got any questions here? No, I don't appear to. Hang on a second. We've got a question coming in here. Which versions of ERP Cloud? Yes, thank you, Dan. Good question. We cover all versions, including HCM, etc. The standard content we have is variable for different parts of the ERP Cloud environment. But talk to us and we'll show you what we've got and we can help you. All right. But I think that's about all we've got time for. If you've got any other questions, what I'd like you to do is email me. That's my email address, Mike W at QSoftware, very straightforward. We are the ERP audit specialists. We've been doing it for 20 years, so let us help you. I think the point I've been trying to make today is you can sleep better if you know whether you've got problems or you haven't. Ignoring them is never going to work. And this is a very, very easy way to actually understand your risks and we'll point you to then how you can possibly remediate them. All right? But thank you for your time today. I hope that was useful. Plug yourself into our social media, YouTube, etc., and you'll see lots of other content there on other issues, auditing, etc. But that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for your time.